Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to incredible people who are creating impact and ripples on the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that is what makes them awesome. Today, my guest is Shannon Waller. Author, coach, speaker, program designer, fellow podcaster, and all-around great human being. Shannon is the director and teamwork coach at Strategic Coach, a coaching program specifically designed for highly successful entrepreneurs. In the program, you discover your unique ability. Here's Shannon's. Intuitively perceiving the essence of a situation, then innovating and compassionately communicating practical strategies to align people's thinking to what's real so they're happy with themselves, maximizing their growth, working as a team, and fulfilling their purpose. Yep, that's Shannon, all right. Shannon is lighthearted and serious-minded. Shannon helps entrepreneurs expand, grow, and become an author of their own domain. This is how Shannon gets to better the pond on a daily basis. Listen to the episode and you'll get to know her, and you'll want to create some ripples on your own pond. Ladies and gentlemen, Shannon Waller. All right, Shannon Waller, my good friend. You're an author, speaker, coach, fellow podcaster, an amazing all-around great human being, good friend of mine, and the list would go on and on and on forever, but we've only got so much time. Shannon Waller, from Strategic Coach, I'm so happy to have you on the Pondcast. This has been a long time coming.
Warren, I am so excited. First of all, I'm excited to see you because it's been way too long. And I'm delighted to be in your podcast. You're one of my fellow Colby buddies who's done amazing work and amazing research. And I've always appreciated our like-mindedness. So I can't wait to have a conversation.
Yes, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I was going to give a little bit of a shout out because you heard you on Andre Bresson and his Impulsive Thinker podcast, which is fantastic. So we're going to put that out there for people to listen to as well. And of course, your Team Success podcast, we want to put that out there as well for people to do because you're just, again, an all-around amazing human being. So we met originally we met through Colby, I think, originally. And then, of course, I was a member of Strategic Coach at one point. And of course, 31 years, 9 months, you've been with Strategic Coach. And so it's been a long time coming. And yeah, so it's about time that we got together to do this.
I totally agree. It's very few people know it's 31 years and 9 months. So well done.
Did you
July
know it
of
was 31 years
91.
and 9
So
months?
Yep, long time.
Okay, it is a long time. All right. So first of all, Shannon, to jump into this, can you tell us sort of a little bit, just sort of a synopsis and a roundabout way of about Strategic Coach and what you do with Strategic Coach?
Absolutely. Strategic Coach is, I just want to say it's awesome. And it's why it doesn't feel like it's a long time that I've been associated with Dan Sullivan and Bab Smith. So Strategic Coach is an incredible program and community. It's really, we now talk about it as a membership. So when you join Strategic Coach, you're joining this incredible entrepreneurial world that is really all about enhancing entrepreneurial success, freedom, and happiness. That is our raison d'etre. That's our reason for being, is to expand entrepreneurial success, freedom, and happiness. And so we've been doing that since, the program started in November of 89. I joined in July of 1991. We've seen it grow from, I think I was number 6 on the team. Now we're well over 100 in Toronto, Chicago, in the UK. We do our workshops in London. We've got clients, global clients from all over the world, over 2,500. So it really has expanded, and it's this all-encompassing experience that's really based on, the core of it is the 4 workshop days during the year, once a quarter, where you come in to think about your thinking. And for entrepreneurs who are super busy, head down, super, ambitious, they've got big drive, big goals, to actually stop, take a breath, slow down, and go through not only incredible thinking tools to help you. It's really about your own experience. We don't tell you how to do anything. You know this. We might give you an idea, like our entrepreneurial time system of free days, focus days, and buffer days. You have to figure out what's a focus day for you, what you want to do on your free days, how many of them you want in a quarter. All of that is your own volition, your own thinking. And then we also really like to help you get to know yourself better, of which Colby is a huge part. So we actually, and I don't know if you know this or not, Warren, but we now, when people register for coach, even before they start, they're given what we call a strengths package. So they get their Colby profile, they get their Clifton strengths, and another awesome profile called Print that is done in correlation with one of our coaches, Adrian Duffy, and then the fabulous Paul Hertz Institute. So, just all ways of getting to know yourself better so you can understand what the freedom to be yourself actually means, which is really exciting. So it's this whole growth program. Again, it's really based around thinking about your thinking. And we get to see people shed the stuff they don't like doing, lean hard into things they love doing, their unique ability, having a bigger impact, growing 10 times. And the ultimate level in coach is what we now call free zone. And this is where you're free from competition, otherwise known as entrepreneurial heaven, as Dan. So I love it. It's all things entrepreneurial. I'm passionate about the team and the relationship part of it. So I'm all about how do people work better together, again, which is where you and I connect so much. So yeah, I know that's kind of a bit of a broad definition, but it's phenomenal to have this community of like-minded, growth-oriented, how does Dan talks about it as ambitious, talented, ambitious, and cooperative, collaborative entrepreneurs. And that's really who's in coach and who stays in coach. And it's just a privilege to be a part of it. And I sometimes I'm like, look at my day. Look who I get to talk to. Look who I get to hang out with. Look at the program I participate in. And it's such a joy. So that's a little bit of a taste of Strategic Coach. That's what we're about.
Love it. And I will say that in my time with Strategic Coach, it, again, thinking about your thinking, it changed my whole thought process. Understanding my unique ability was an absolute massive game changer in my life to position myself to what I do best. And one of the things that I loved about Coach was the people I got to hang out with.
Right.
And I between quarters, like, you'd miss them. And and there's still some relationships, it's been years now, but there's still some relationships that I still have maintained from back then, because there's such amazing like-minded people that it was just it was a vacuum of just great people. And that's the one thing I really absolutely loved about it. And I will say, just over here, you can't see it obviously, but I still have all my Strategic Coach binders all lined up. And and in fact, I have a binder here from the Goal Cultivator, if you want to go back, way back.
That's interesting. That's a scarce resource right now, because we discontinued on purpose. So hang on to that. That's worth something.
All right, well, gotta go into the museum one day, the Strategic Coach Museum. All
there you
right.
go.
So Shannon, what got you from being a gosling, and I'm talking like where were you hatched? What was your humble beginnings to leaving the nest when you actually had to go out on your own? Either you left the nest or your parents gave you a gentle nudge in order for you to fly, to where you are today. Shannon Waller, what is your backstory?
Oh my goodness. I'll try and make it short. So my backstory, so two fabulous parents, Marilyn and Bob, and Mary's still around. My dad passed away a few years ago. And so I was raised, I call them hippie parents, which is kind of funny. Although my dad was a lawyer in small town Hanover, Ontario. So small town. I think when I was there, it was probably 2,500, 3,500 people, maybe up to 5,000 or 6,000 now. We're not sure. Anyway, great. Hanover, Ontario.
Hanover, Ontario. That's where you began your life.
Yeah. Okay. Technically, I was born in Burlington, but 6 months old, I moved to Hanover. So I actually was a small town kid. Okay. And then my mom got restless. My dad was, I guess, ready for change, or wanted to keep our family happy. We moved to Toronto, and that, I have to tell you, this was country mouse moving to the city. It was a very awkward transition. I was very naive when I moved to Toronto. So it took a while. Now I can't imagine anything else. Of course, I love the convenience of the city, but I also do, my husband, my family, we have a cottage property, which I love. So I'm a nature child in some ways, and then also just love the city. So that's kind of how I started, and then progressed. When I went to university was really interesting because my family going to university was a thing, but I could not decide for the life of me, Warren, what the heck I wanted to take. So I ended up with philosophy, which is just the most impractical thing of life. I did 1 year at a university, didn't love it. Then came back, worked for a year, went, oh, okay, this is why I want to go to school. Went back to Western, had a great time, knew why I was there. Finished. They only had a 3-year degree in the program that I was in, but it was all about people and their thinking, and people in business, which is still to this day my passion. I'm one of the few people I know who have a degree in what she's doing. So I kind of think of what I do as organization development for entrepreneurial companies. So I have the world's longest degree title for a 3-year degree. It's Bachelor of Arts, Administrative and Commercial Studies, Social Organization, and Human Relations. Yeah, exactly. But that isn't even how I got to coach. So did that, worked for a really interesting company for 3.5 years. But I was on the admin side, which if you know my Colby, which you do, it's like that's the stupidest idea of life. Not that I have a brain, which I appreciate, but still I would get all my admin work done against the deadline, late at night. I had the highest billable hours, probably because I was not doing work I was supposed to do. Anyway, one of our clients at that location was Strategic Coach. So they would come in and rent our seminar room space. So super quick story. They had approached my friend Ross, with whom I worked. You know Ross really well.
We know Ross Slater. Let's give him a shout out. Hey, Ross.
Hey, Ross. Love you. And he and I became very fast friends, and we've been friends ever since. And I think he and I met in 1990. So we're still friends 43 years later, which is kind of cool. And so what happened was he was approached by Strategic Coach to come and do something with them. And because we were friends, he told me, I'm like, ooh, he was going to introductory presentation. I'm like, see if I can come too. So we did. We went to this. This is the day of slides. Okay. So if you could imagine a slide carousel.
Yeah.
We go into this dark room. My colleague Susan, my later colleague Susan. So the salesperson Susan was kind of setting up the room. These 6 men at the time in suits came in, and then Dan was there, Dan Sullivan, and he was in the corner, and all the lights went off, and we were sitting in the back. And this disembodied voice from the corner kind of explains how the world was shifting from the industrial into the knowledge economy, and how you need to be successful in this change. And turned out all the people in the room were entrepreneurs. So we left. Thanks, Susan. Went back to the office, and she called 15 minutes later after we got back, and she talked to Ross. She goes, Ross, can I talk to your friend Shannon? He goes, yeah, here she is. I didn't know later that she didn't know that I worked with where to find me. And she just asked me 2 really interesting questions. She said, did you enjoy the presentation? I said, I loved it. I knew all of those pieces of information, but I'd never put them together that way. Dan's brilliant at integrating. And then she asked me the second question, which was the critical one, which is, are you happy with what you're doing? And out of my mouth pops, no, I'm bored. 5 weeks later, I was on board with a coach. And she asked me how much I need to live on because it was going to be commission. And I calculated it, but I forgot taxes. So it was a very lean first 2.5 years. I used to have to borrow rent money from my sister, Julia Waller, who also gets a shout out. Anyway, but I made it, thank goodness. And so that was really my start at Coach. And so it was just one of those things where for me, I wanted a chance to make more of a difference. I wanted to work directly with clients. And that's really what I had a chance to do. So I started off in sales, but then after another 3.5 years, I got bored. I thought my brain was going to rust. Went back to school, started a certificate in training, came up with the idea for a 1-day workshop for team members because my clients were calling me saying, can you please explain what I'm doing at Coach? Because I'm not doing a good job. And then one day a team member called me and said, could you please explain? Because I don't get it. And I was like, the light bulb went on. So I had to come up with the idea for a course as a school project through Ryerson University. And then I told Babs, and she goes, great, let's do it. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Dan designed my first workshop, and then I started coaching the following November of 95, and I had gotten certified in Colby that year. Okay. So being certified in Colby made all the difference to my confidence level because I was coaching people very different than my MO. Mm-hmm. And then my career was set. Me coaching, me working with team members is how that came out. So then created an entrepreneurial attitude exercise because some of the people who showed up did not have one. So with Ross and other team members came up with that. Out of that came the Team Success Handbook, the Team Success Podcast. We also have a video series, then multiplication by subtraction for people, the really the graceful way to exit wrong fit team members. That's the subtitle of that book. Also worked on the unique ability books with Julia and Catherine. So, and now I'm coaching, coached the team leader program for years. We've got team leader, team tools, strategic assistant, all the things. And now I'm coaching our 10X program, which is the second level of our program, which is just a joy. I love every second of it. So I feel very privileged to kind of stay in my unique ability, keep making a difference, keep contributing, keep expanding that value creation based on what people need. And that's kind of the short-ish synopsis.
Okay, I want to take you back. There's a couple different things here that I'd like to unwrap, but one of them I think it's what's fascinating is that with your beginnings with Coach, like meeting Ross, hitting it off, and then and it just so happens that they're doing this presentation in that building. Like, so that how I see this from what you said was it found you. You didn't find it.
Well, it's true. Like Susan called. And we were actually we had to travel a little bit to get to the space. But I was open. I was curious and I was open, curious is actually my word for 2023, which is kind of fun. I was curious. I was interested. And then when I showed that, somehow, Susan met me for seconds. She was totally focused on these potential clients. Mm-hmm. And somehow, however, I just showed up. Thank goodness. I'm very grateful. Had her call Ross / me. And then I was brave / stupid enough to say yes. Stupid because I didn't really figure it all out in advance. But yeah, I think it really did find me. And it goes back, Warren, when I was trying to applying for jobs after university, like most people send out hundreds and hundreds of resumes. I sent out 6. That was weird. And I didn't even get a job through that. I ended up getting it through a friend of my dad's at the company was called New Service Alliance. And so I was so picky back then. It's kind of a miracle that Strategic Coach ended up in my lap. And thank goodness I said yes. Best, one of my best life decisions ever. Maybe next to marrying my husband. It was definitely one of the best life decisions I've ever made.
Yeah, that's really fascinating when you say that, because again, and I go back to the saying that it found you. So, you only put 6 resumes, and all these things happen, but yet you just happen to meet Ross, go to this thing. There's an attraction there, right? Mm-hmm. They find you say yes, and everything changes, right?
Yep.
So the 6, you didn't even need to send out the 6 resumes because the fact is that path is already made for you anyway.
Right. It's true.
So I want to take you back a little bit to your younger days as a Gosling. When you were young, and you can go back to public school and maybe go into high school. 2 questions. Number one, looking back, did you have an interest in people, thinking, philosophy, psychology, all those pieces looking way back when you were a kid?
I did. And I was also, again, raised by my parents who were kind of into thinking about their thinking. We were raised as part of a trust community, which is not anything bad. It's all good. And so I was used to people, kind of an offshoot of the 70s, kind of exploring who they were, what they were thinking. Creating community was very much a part of my upbringing. Brilliant book by Dr. Jack Gibb, called Trust. And that's what the foundation of this community was. So I was kind of used to those deeper topics and that human experience, which was interesting and to grow up in, because it was kind of like major holidays. It wasn't every day, but that's kind of the environment that my family was into. And then I meet school children and they have no clue what I'm talking about. This was not popular culture. So it kind of made me a bit of a misfit when it came to school. I didn't fit in easily. I was very gullible. Oh my God, stuff I got tricked into is embarrassing. So that kind of made it challenging. Now, it made me so much more astute and aware as an adult. And I have a much, much, much bigger bandwidth than most people. So I'm very grateful for my upbringing, but it made it pretty darn awkward as I was growing up. And then later I was, I with my Colby, which is 3295 for those most listeners I hope are familiar with Kolbe MOs. So long, quick start, short fact finder, short follow through. I'm intelligent, thank goodness, but I didn't have a lot of fact finder follow through to bring to school. So I wondered why I was always the one writing the paper at 2 a.m. the deadline.
So
This was in high school, this was in university, just the pattern continued. Right.
My 2486, I am with you. I am so with you, Shannon.
I know.
Right. There was so many things I talk about, even when I speak, some of the things like show your work made no sense to me. And right. And and there I am at 2:00 in the morning, finishing the paper up and then changing it first thing before I actually hand it in. Right. And then getting heck because, well, but you knew it had to be handed in. I'm like,
no.
And right.
Yeah. So Kolbe was like learning my Kolbe profile was so incredibly validating, justified so much of explained so much of my experience and justified.
Yeah.
Because we know our creativity doesn't kick in until the deadline.
Right.
And there's one situation, it was my poor friend. So we had to read this long book. Oh, I think it was Great Expectations, Dickens. Torturous book to get through, just saying. And we had to write a book report. So I read the first 5 pages, the middle 5 pages, and the last 5 pages. And I wrote a book report and I was critical of it. This is a secret to getting a good mark, by the way. And and I end up getting, I think I got an A-, and my friend got a B, who'd read the entire book, had all the things. And she was so mad. I don't blame her. And the only criticism was, could have used more examples. I'm like, no, Sherlock, of course it could. But I was just so definitive in my negative opinion because I really did not enjoy the book. Anyway, it was so I could occasionally pull off miracles, but no one could check my work because I never had time. Did they want to read it at 4 a.m.? Probably not.
But here's the thing is, and I always tell people, especially with short fact finders, is never underestimate the power of simplification.
Brilliant. Yes. Never underestimate the power of simplification. Wasn't it Mark Twain or someone said, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have the time to make it short.
That's correct. I would have made it shorter if I only had the time.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Much better. And it's so true. And unfortunately for me, well, maybe other people like you and me, academia wants the long version. I'm kind of like, why? Ross, this is a fun story. Ross had someone come in to do business writing. It was a professor from York University, and he really liked her. And so she had us, submit samples of work. I'm like, I think I don't actually write enough. She goes, that's never the problem. Everyone writes too much and we need to edit. And then I handed her my stuff and she goes, oh, yeah, you're right. It needed more explanation, not less, which apparently is not most people's issue.
So I'm going to share this one thing before I move on, because I got to be a good steward of time. But I think this is fascinating, Shannon, and I love sharing this because it's a problem I'm trying to solve in business. And so if you look at when I speak for Tech Canada, so I have a lot of Tech Canada members in my database, my Kolbe. Now this is fascinating. So everyone that's in tech is in a leadership position, every single one. So out of our whole entire database, when I look at we call resistant fact finder, so that's my guess for people who have short fact finder. Do you want to know the percentage of short fact finders in leadership roles that I have got from what I've gathered so far? Give me a percentage.
My percentage actually comes from my analysis of our clientele, and it was 40%.
You want to know what mine is?
No. Yes, I do want to know. What is it? 6% resistant?
6% resistant fact finders in my whole entire in my database, all of Tech Canada.
So that means that now are they okay, what are the rest of the percentages?
So then, off the top of my head, again in details, there's actually equally distributed between accommodating and initiating.
Right.
Higher in initiating.
Isn't that fascinating? Now, do you have the numbers for the percentage of the quick start?
Not in my head. I'm going on this piece because what I'm coming to sort of terms with is that because we seem to reward the people with the reports and the data and the research and the analysis and all those things. We reward that, but we don't reward simplification. And I go back to, that's one of the reasons I want to get into education, to say how many kids in school get good marks for simplifying.
Right.
And I think it's the same in business. I don't
Yeah.
think we get rewarded for simplification. Never underestimate the power of simplification.
That is fascinating. Okay, now I just want to profile everybody.
So,
Um,
so anyway, I just want to throw that out at you, and I think because I think it's interesting. So there's people like you who are in, and you said it earlier. You said something really smart. You said, "I'm not a good manager. I'm a good leader," and there's a big difference between those two.
100%.
And I think when you take those people that are in leadership roles that are like you and I, yeah, we're much better leaders than we are managers.
Mhm. It's interesting. My husband worked for Bell Canada for 37 years, and he was at the director level, and he was really clear because he would often have to present. He was in charge of like capital budget of $1.1 billion. It was crazy, and his team, he had the highest employee satisfaction level in the entire company on his team. So I'm super proud of him for that. But he's a 2-2-10-4. So he had PhDs working for him, but he was super clear that when he was going to present to VPs and the executive VPs and the super high level, he said, I have to tell the story. So he was a master at simplification, and they wanted Bruce Green's his name. They wanted Bruce's take on it. Now, they probably would appreciate a little more follow through too. But they really appreciate him telling the story and boiling it down to the essence and the bottom line, because that's at the super high executive level of a large corporation.
Mm-hmm.
How he lasted for that long is a miracle. But it's kind of interesting because that they have to make decisions on the condensed information. So it actually is a really valuable skill or valuable quality to have if you're aware. And so I've always found that kind of interesting. He was totally an anomaly though. Like he's in your 6%.
There it is.
Clearly. Because most people didn't do it that way. But he had, again, and I worked with his team. I would go and give free Colby presentations to his team. And it's like, yeah, have you ever noticed that you're at his office door and his eyes glaze over and they all broke out laughing? Because they're 8 and 9 fact finders.
Right.
That's who was on his team. But he had them doing the deep data dive so that he could tell the story to the higher ups, which I always found was an interesting dynamic that fits into your model.
Yeah, and I find what's interesting about that, what I love about it is that with his MO, he'd be such a great storyteller, right?
He's a brilliant storyteller.
Brilliant storyteller, right? So just one last thing, and I'm just gonna find, because I want to bookend this because you understand this, and I hope our listeners will understand this as well. But at the other end, with the initiating implementers, do you want to know how many initiating implementers I've found within that database with tech?
I don't even want to guess. I'm going to guess it's really small. 4%.
4%.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
That doesn't surprise me either. That makes a little more sense. But and usually those ones that are there are, never want to be behind their desk anyway, so they're just trying to find a way out into the shop.
Well, and often they're more in real estate, land, equipment, that kind of thing. They're often out. They're really often really great problem solvers, and usually they're not ahead of a big company. They might be head of their own, right? The other people I've found that are initiating implementers are all the hands-on, obviously they're hands-on people, but like mechanics or people own mechanic shops or artisans. One of Julie's and my really good family friends, it's his birthday today. He's this incredible wood turner, like makes art out of wood. He does pens and just all of this stuff. Paul Collard's his name. And just watching him craft what he can do. His wife's a jewelry designer, also another initiating implementer. So that's where they tend to be more like sole proprietors rather than managing, if I'm going to completely generalize. That's what I see.
But what I found is which is really interesting on this is that the ones that are in bigger business don't enjoy it.
No.
That's what I found out. So
well, they can't strive in that area.
Yeah.
Like it's frustrating. Architects maybe when they're building their 3D models, but that's kind of it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So anyway, okay, we're going to be a good steward of time. That was fun. All right. Yeah. So Shannon, what has been the greatest thing, positive or negative, the biggest or greatest thing that's happened to you that's ruffled your feathers? And how did you respond to it?
Personally and professionally?
Pick one.
Interesting. I know at one point, this is going back a million years. At one point, thank you. One point, Babs and Dan, we used to have licensed coaches. We don't have that anymore. And we were selling into a particular region. And then Dan and Babs, for a business decision, decided that they were going to give our territory away. We were not happy about that. It actually, both of us shut down our productivity for about 6 weeks. It was a bit of a disaster. So what I've learned from that, more importantly, and I was younger and a little less mature. What I learned from that is it's super important to give context. It's super important to give people, to communicate your intention, why, even if it's hard, even if it, especially if it's going to be challenging for them, what the thinking behind it is, include them in the conversation so that even if they don't like it, they can understand and appreciate it, if that makes sense. So that's kind of one of the things I learned from that. I hate being at the effect of it. The other thing I learned is that I need to be author of my own domain. It's very important to me to have my own thing going. And I do. I create the whole strategic coach team programs, obviously with a ton of teamwork. But that's been my baby, right? And I have a lot of latitude to create new things, to make decisions, to all of that. And so it's been very like Dan and Babs and I all have very similar Colbys. Babs is 3392, Dan's 22104. Yes, same as my husband. I'm 3295. So I always describe us as, Dan's got the program, Babs has the company, and I have team programs. Not that I don't, collaborate a lot on the other two areas, but we're really good neighbors over the fence. I don't tell Dan what to do. I don't tell Babs what to do. They don't tell me what to do. It's all good. Right. And so we've kind of grown up a lot. That's why we have more of a partnership than anything else, is because we really respect other people's domains. So I was much happier. And also I'm excellent at sales, but not unique. So moving into my area of expertise and creating that, much happier, to go back to your previous examples, than I was being, and I was not the total steward of my own domain in that other area. So I'm much happier doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, though, Shannon, to say that you have the autonomy.
Yes.
Right. You have autonomy, and that is so crucial to be able to, you're steering your own ship. I'm part of something bigger than myself, but yet within that I have autonomy to lead what I need to lead, rather than being told what to do or somebody putting parameters around you is probably like a really bad idea.
Yeah, there's this other profile I mentioned called Print, which stands for imprint, which I love. And it uncovers your basically two of your 9 motivations. It's loosely associated cousin of Enneagram, if anyone's familiar with that. And my 2 underlying motivations are to enjoy life and be happy, and to be strong and self-reliant. And the strong and self-reliant is like, don't tell me what to do. Bad things will happen.
Bad things will happen. So I'm having your sister Julia on the podcast. She is scheduled.
Fantastic.
And I promised her I would do my print, because we're going to have so much fun, because I'm going to interview her.
Right.
And then we're going to do a back-to-back, and she's going to interview me. So it's going to be super fun.
That's going to be so fun. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
Okay. So did you know that geese fly 71% further and faster when flying in the V formation than when flying alone? 71%.
That's a massive percentage.
That's a massive percentage. And that's why so I would say about, with organizations, like if you watch nature doesn't try. Nature does. And when you're trying to help, just understand that. So what do you think the secret is to getting a team? This is right in your wheelhouse here, Shannon. What do you think the secret is to getting a team flying in that V formation?
Ooh, okay. How long do we have? The number 1
minutes for your
really
off.
Exactly right. The number one step, and it's know thyself. If people are unaware / clueless / not interested in understanding what their unique strengths are, their unique non-strengths, what gives them energy, what doesn't give them energy, and they're unwilling to, I don't usually use the term lean in, but they're unwilling to embrace that, next to impossible. And it's interesting because people's minds can override them. So people can have a goal of having this kind of status in an organization, or this title, or this whatever, and they can override their own instincts you know this, you've done studies on it, makes people sick.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Yes.
your research for that. Your research is so good. And so they'll override themselves. I cannot create what I would call a unique ability team or the 71% efficiencies from flying at a V if someone's unwilling to do that. So that's number one. You have to know, accept, embrace, engage with yourself. And that is cognitive in terms of what you know. It's affective in terms of what you're interested in and passionate about. That makes a massive, the whole creative process kicks off with what you care about. With motivation, if you're not motivated, nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. You're not going to employ your brain or your starving instincts to get anything done. And then how do you strive? How do you problem solve? And really, once you appreciate, what I find really interesting is once you appreciate your own strengths, unique ability to use that term, it makes it very easy to appreciate other people's. Mm-hmm. If you think everyone's the same, then you're just going to be mad at them for not being like you. My favorite quote comes from an old client, Peter. He goes, before I knew about Colby, I thought everyone was just like me, only not as good. It's brilliant. And it's so true. We all think that people should be like us. They're just screwed up on purpose. Yeah. And so when you have an appreciation for Colby and Print and Clifton Strengths and all the other things, it just means you actually can appreciate how people are unique and different and how they can contribute to you and to the project, more importantly. That's number one.
I'll cut you off for a second there, because one of my favorite lines that I created and I use in my speaking is, no one ever gets up in the morning and says, "Gee, I sure hope I do a crappy job today." Right? No one ever sets out to do that.
No, unless they're really mad at the company.
and yet other people though say, well, how come they're doing such a crappy job? They never set out to do that. So they were just like me, just not as good.
Exactly. Okay. So I've just always, Peter, brilliant quote. So I think know thyself is one, but that's not enough. If they're not really clear on where they're going, if they don't know the direction, you've got a bunch of really talented people flying in every which direction. So really being clear on and the way we define it at Coach. So we have a couple of tools: strategy circle, impact filter, certainty, uncertainty. We have amazing thinking tools, but it's like, what does it look like in terms of the result? What does it look like when it's done and done well? So that's part of it. And then why are we doing it? What's the purpose, importance, and ideal outcome? So really being clear on that. So if you're the leader or if you're co-creating it with your team, that also works really well. Then everyone's bought in and engaged, kind of going back to my previous example. And then they can actually employ their talents. And then I would also add, and this comes out of our certainty, uncertainty tool, stating what you know now, like what is certain, what's a known quantity, and what don't we know? And that's what we've discovered, especially from, we only work with entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs have this idea and they're like, okay, great, we're doing it. And the team's like, yeah, what about? And if you actually lay out if the entrepreneur, the leader lays out the uncertainty, it's this actual massive invitation to teamwork. Someone's like, well, you don't know that, but I know where we can go find out, or I have some knowledge from a previous experience that I had, or, hey, so-and-so is an expert in this, I'm sure they would know. And so when the leader who looks like they've got their act together and knows everything, or at least people presume you do, which we never do, when you say, what do we know and what don't, what's unknown, what I'm uncertain about, that is an invitation for people to contribute their best talents and knowledge. So it's, again, going back, it's people knowing, accepting, and embracing and leaning into their own strengths and capabilities, their unique ability. It's being super clear on the direction. And then in terms of the getting there, it's really working like, what do we know now that we didn't know yesterday? And working those uncertainties out. And then I find that people achieve the result. So those are like simplified 3 steps in terms of doing it. The other thing, though, there has to be a mindset. They have to have what I would call an entrepreneurial mindset, which means you have to be willing to work for something bigger than you. If you're just in it for your own status, if it's you, Inc., and I don't mean that in the good way, I mean that in you're just looking to kind of like climb up the ladder so that you get what you want and the rest of the stuff isn't as important. That's never going to work. You have to be willing to include yourself and be included as part of something bigger that's meaningful. Like you could have the goose flying by itself. It might get there exhausted and sick and hungry,
Exhausted.
right? But flying together, it's like, no, you're actually working to help everyone get there. And that has to be a value. That's also a value,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it kind of, that might even precede everything else. You have to be willing to see that the the whole is greater than any one individual,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're aligned on those values. Those are some of the things that come to mind as you ask that question, Warren. I'm sure we could spend hours talking about this, and it's a passion for both of us.
Yep.
But those are some of the key elements that I've found, because if those are not true, it can't happen. Which is kind of how I figure things out. It's like, oh, what if it's not true would prevent this from working? And those are some of the things.
I have a sneaking suspicion there's going to be a part 2 to this podcast. There's
Yay.
going to be a part 2. We might dive deep right into that piece. That'll be super fun. All right. So, Shannon Waller, what are you doing right now to better the pond? What ripples are you creating?
Oh my goodness. Such a big question. I think it actually comes back to my unique ability statement, which I did with the wonderful Julia Waller. I'm just going to pull it off the wall as we speak. So the more I can do this, I'm just going to read you my statement, if I may, because it feels like it's relevant. So my unique ability is intuitively perceiving the essence of a situation, then innovating and compassionately communicating practical strategies to align people's thinking with what's real, so they're happy with themselves, maximizing their growth, working as a team, and fulfilling their purpose. So when I am coaching, do you like that?
I do. I love it. That is
No.
so you.
I know, right? That's what unique ability is. So there's like 10, there are 10 my best unique ability habits, but it distills down to this sentence. So that's who I am. That's kind of my raison d'etre, right? That's when I am freed up to do this, I am making the biggest difference that I know how to make with my gifts, with my talents. And when I'm not doing it, not so much. So that shows up in terms of how, like, activities I'm doing, coaching. So that can be our 10X clients. It could be our team. It could be working with our clients and their executive leadership teams, which I also love doing. We call them on-sites at Strategic Coach. When I'm working with our team to help them do this, that also falls under that. So I'm really lucky. There's another team I'm working with, which is newer, which I'm still finding my way in that one. But the more I can be in that kind of coaching, encouraging role, which does mean aligning people's thinking with what's real, compassionately. Because sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's not really working. But if I can find a way to do it that is in a way that's for them, then I'll be successful, if that makes sense. So that's who I am in terms of bettering the pond. And then those are some of the ways that I'm doing it. I love working with 10X entrepreneurs. I love working with 10X team leaders, which is another group I have in Chicago. I love working with our team. I love working with Dan. So I work with Dan on the quarterly books. I interview him based on his fast filters and mini impact filter. Then we do the final version. We do the video. I do Inside Strategic Coach podcast with him. I love doing my own podcasts. So any way that I'm creating value for our audience based on real issues, not pretend, not theoretical, it's not just cognitive. It has to make a difference in terms of how people feel and how they act. Then I feel like I'm bettering the pond, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I have one question for you, and we won't dive in again. If we do part 2 on this, we can dive deeper into these things. But you say I love working with 10X entrepreneurs. I love working with Dan. I love working with. Why do you love it so much?
Ooh, because it's fun. So, but Dan and Babs and I and Bruce all have the same enjoy life and be happy motivation. So it's fun. It's light. I got a great compliment one time. And it's an expression that comes from one of our coaches coaching. Her name's Teresa Easler. And she goes, and one of her team members said, Shannon, you really got a good line of being lighthearted, serious-minded. And that I'm like, oh, thank you. That was such a gift, because I love getting, done, but I also like to have fun doing it. And so when we can create new things that's super useful, I mean, I actually say to Dan, this is circling back to philosophy, my first year of university, I get to sit and hang out with Dan in the free zone workshops, in our podcasts, in our books. And I am with one of the world's best philosophers.
Mhm.
That's who I get to hang out with. We get to explore mindsets. We get to explore thinking. We get to explore approaches to the world. That's philosophy, right? And I feel like I've circled back to when I
Mhm.
was 18, which is kind of wild. That was 40 years ago. And like, oh, how lucky am I? So I've actually stayed on the path, which is really cool. But now I've just found someone who's way more practical and relevant, in my opinion. And so that's why I love it. I get to think really cool thoughts with really cool people doing really impactful work. What is not to love in that picture? None of it is theoretical. It's all practical and real and makes a difference. I get to see the difference in our clients every single quarter. And there's nothing better.
You know, there was always the statement of saying, find something that you love, and then learn how to make money at it. And or if you find something that you love, you never have to work another day in your life. Blah blah blah. And I always thought they were so cliche. I thought, like, yeah, sure, wouldn't that be nice if? But what I found fascinating is when you find that, it is very true. It is just
100%.
I tell people I get paid to play.
Right.
I get paid to play.
Hmm.
Right? It's not work. It's fun. It's joy. And it's love. Right. And so I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Yay, I love that. And it is it's such an unrealistic goal for most people.
Hmm.
But being in the more entrepreneurial space, you actually have the freedom to choose. And so not only do I get to do what I love, I also don't need to do the things I'm crap at and that
Hmm.
I don't love that are draining my energy. Because even if something takes 5% of my time, if I really don't have the mental energy for it, it can take up 50% of my brain,
Right.
maybe more. So I think it's a combination of doing what you love with your audience. And when you talk to Julia, I think this will be a key part of the conversation, at least it is for me. People's unique ability doesn't change, but their audience does. They
Mm.
get really refined, like who
Yeah.
claps, who says thank you, who rewards you, who pays you. That's your audience. And your audience, my audience has gotten more and more refined. I
Hmm.
don't I don't work with the same people I worked with in 1995. I now work with 10x team leaders. That's with whom I work from a team side. So I think, doing what you love with the people you love, and then also not having to do the things that you're not good at. So I didn't set up this conversation. Katrina did. My,
Right.
my brilliant support partner, who's my total Colby compliment, 6733, right? If I had to do that part, not that I don't love talking to you, but the whole experience wouldn't be as fun as it is. It's like a 10 out of 10,
Right.
right? But it would have, so not degrading the experience, I think is
Right.
also a part of it. No one talks about, but not, if you had to do fact finding all day, Warren, you'd be like, kill me
Oh,
now.
oh, shoot me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My head used to be asleep I'm an excellent reader. My mom taught me to read when I was 3,
Yeah.
and I would go to the Toronto Reference Library and pass out. You'd find my head on the desk because it was all fact finding and it just exhausted me.
It's great. It's a great way to sleep.
Yeah, it was.
That's funny. All right. So I have two more questions already, and we're going to get you out of here. So,
Yeah.
what is one lesson that you've learned along your journey that you would share with an entrepreneur starting a business today?
Starting a business today. Interesting. Oh my gosh. Okay, so okay. So my number one thing is, well, there's a two-parter. So know yourself, right? Don't because the last thing you want to do is design a business around doing what you don't like to do. That would be not a wise thing to do, and you're a smart human. The other thing is to pay extraordinary attention to the goals and what we call the dangers, opportunities, and strengths of your audience. Who do you love? Who do you want to be a hero to? And then know everything about them in terms of what their future holds, what wakes them up at 3 a.m. from a worry standpoint. What are they worried about? Also know what might keep them up because they're excited. What opportunities are they excited about? And then also, please, please, please don't neglect what they're great at. They have a ton of strengths without you, right? That they can lean on. And then you can simply supplement with your strengths to complement theirs to help them get where it is they're going. And we call this the DOS conversation. So, and you would remember this from Coach. It's like when you know this intimately with your audience, they grant you what Dan calls a value creation monopoly. It's not the monopoly where it's imposed, they grant it to you. It's like, you know me so well. Why would I ever work with anyone else? That would be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And they've granted you that value creation monopoly because their goals, their dangers, their opportunities, their strengths, and then obviously how to create a solution for them that gets them that, then that's an incredible relationship. So I would do that. And Dan always says, basically work with check writers. Don't bounce your ideas off people who can actually write you a check. And start with one. Don't try and create something for billions. Start with one human. That is actually the thing to do. If you do that and you create value for that one person, then 2, then 10, then 20, then 40, then that's kind of how that goes.
You said something really interesting. Who do you want to be a hero to? I think it's an incredible mindset. If you put yourself in that mindset, and then there'll always be gratitude on both sides of the equation.
Yep. Yeah, and the truth is, we're not going to create value for people that we don't love, that we don't appreciate, where we don't trust. And that's one of Dan's quarterly books. All this is Dan's thinking, in case you're wondering. So who do you want to be a hero to? Because it's tough to create value doing something you're bad at, not your unique ability. And it's really tough to want to create value for someone you don't love, care for, or respect. Why would we do that? So when you want to be a hero to someone, it's and knowing who that is, and I got to tell you, it's a narrow band, right? Means that you get to have a great relationship with them, as you said, as opposed to kind of contorting yourself. Dan has a description: contorting yourself into a shape to serve people you don't even like. Right. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
And that's where hear people get resigned and tired and bitter, and they kind of demean their clients and they talk poorly about them. I'm like, oh, that's bad. It's painful on both sides. I wouldn't want to be their client. I sure as heck wouldn't want to be them. So yeah, have your audience be who you want to be a hero to. And that can be very, very narrow. The narrower the niche, the bigger the market, is another Dan expression.
Yep. No, I agree with that. All right. So one last question. Shannon Waller, if you were standing on the top of a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
I will say my latest lesson that I've been learning from Dan, which keeps showing up in different ways, and it would be to take yourself seriously. Take your dreams seriously, take your strengths seriously, take your non-strengths seriously, take your ambition seriously, take your relationship seriously, take yourself seriously. When what that means is that you're your point of reference, not the world's perspective. And every time I look at where I need to grow more in my life, it's where I wasn't taking myself seriously enough. It can still be in a lighthearted way, but you take yourself bloody seriously. I think all the growth and development you would ever and results that you want from your life actually come out of that. So I'm so glad you asked, because that was almost my answer to the second question or the second last question before you added for people starting a business. But that's been my latest lesson lately, is to take myself even more seriously than I do now. And every time I have, that's when new opportunities have shown up.
So be lighthearted, serious-minded.
Love it. Yes.
All right. So, Shannon, by the way, while I say this, I'll get this on camera, but will you please send me your unique ability statement?
I will. I have it right here. Okay. I'm probably going to, if I can't find it on my desktop, I'm going to be asking Julia for it, right?
Okay. Yeah, but send it to me.
I absolutely will.
I want it. Okay. All right. So I want to thank you, Shannon Waller, for your time today. I thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for everything you're doing to better the pond, because you just are an amazing human being. We love you so much. If anybody wants to find you, where do we go?
Oh my goodness. A couple places. So LinkedIn is probably the best from a professional standpoint. That's definitely the place to go. And references to all my other goodies are there. If you're interested in all things entrepreneurial team related, check out the Team Success podcast. And then, those are kind of the best places to go check me out. Oh, I know. There's some cool downloads at yourteamsuccess.com. And there you can actually get a copy of the entrepreneurial attitude exercise that was the basis of the Team Success Handbook. And that for me is, that's where all my goodies go. My recommended reading list, all the things are on yourteamsuccess.com.
Yourteamsuccess.com. We'll get that in the show notes so that people can go there. So, all right, there you have it, folks. We had a wonderful time here with Shannon Waller, and this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond, to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, Shannon. Was that a kiss?
Yes, it was. This was such a delight. I'm like, you just made my day. So thank you.
Oh, good. And shall we do a part two?
I would love to do a part two with you,
Okay, we're gonna set
especially.
that up because I want to dive deep into some things together. Well, I love your perspective. You're so smart, and your passion for people and teams, it just pours out of you. It's just who you are, and and if we can harness some of that and share with others to learn, then I think that we've kind of done our part.
Yeah. And if people can be happy with themselves and what they're doing, that fulfills my mission and contributes to other people. So, yes, I will talk about that all day, every day.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you. Thank you again so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.